Tonight, the storm of the century heading towards Florida, with millions of people urged to move to safety. Your home could become your coffin. Authorities warn of life-threatening storm surges when Hurricane Milton makes landfall. Many are heeding that call, but tonight we'll hear from one man who says he's staying put. Plus,
it has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
And I'll speak to this veteran weatherman who broke down in tears during his life report. Also coming up, Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu speak for the first time in 7 weeks as Israel considers to plan a strike on Iran. And millions already voting in the US elections will be live in one of the counties that could be crucial to the final result. Good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Yalda Hakim. As the Middle East braces for what could be another escalation in this long-running conflict, Israel's defense minister today promised that his country's response to Iran's missile attack will be, in his words, lethal, precise and surprising. As leaders here consider their next move, I want to focus on another significant global challenge, the evidence of which is currently bearing down on the US state of Florida. Now, I'm talking about Hurricane Milton. It's already one of the most powerful storms on record in the Gulf of Mexico. It's been described as unsurvivable and has been made even more intense because of the world's warmer oceans, one of the effects of climate change. Millions will make landfall as a Category 4 with winds close to 130 miles per hour. These images, taken from the International Space Station, show the hurricane moving towards Florida today. The winds will strengthen when the storm hits mainland Florida between Tampa Bay and Fort Myers. It's expected to slam directly into the city of Sarasota. Our US correspondent James Matthews is in Tampa and sent us this report.
Tornadoes are appearing on the horizon here. It's the precursor to the hurricane, and it isn't pretty. We're past the calm before the storm. It's closer than that. Wind and rain are blowing through west central Florida. This was the picture in Tampa. There will be more of this, much more.
Winds will be fierce at well over 100 miles per hour, with storm surges reaching up to 15 feet and up to 18 inches of rain. It's looking like the storm of the century. I know it's really tough, leaving behind your home, your belongings, everything you own. But I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions as we head to the next 24 hours. It's literally a matter of life and death.
These are the latest pictures from NASA, tracking the hurricane's path. Where it hits is the ominous uncertainty.
This is my piece of paradise.
Nick Hollings is a British resident of Sarasota.
This is obviously down the street. It's my buddy's truck there. So you can see we've just boarded up the house out the front.
Life on the edge of an evacuation zone is life on the edge.
Just to see all these lovely places that I've been going to for so many years at risk of just being washed away is just heartbreaking, to be honest.
Landfall of this hurricane is still several hours away, but already you get a sense of its power with roaring wind and driving rain. From these empty streets, it's clear people have heeded the warnings to evacuate. Right now, downtown Tampa is Ghost Town Tampa. Hi, Dan. How are you doing? In Tampa Bay, we found one man who's ignoring the warnings. Joseph Malinowski goes by Lieutenant Dan on TikTok. He's going nowhere, hurricane or not.
The plan is to sit down, and hunker down. I'm going to be fine. I mean, this is a boat. It's meant to be on water, and the water's going to surge. It's not a tsunami. It's not going to come in and come over the side and capsize my boat.
It's a measure of optimism in the shadow of the hurricane. Under darkening skies, it's thin on the ground.
And we'll be speaking to James in a moment. But joining me now is Matthew Heller. He's a Tampa Bay resident. And as we saw there in Matthew's piece, some people are heeding the warnings, other people are not. And Matthew joins us live now. Matthew, you have decided to stay put. Just tell us why.
You know, I'm a Floridian. I'm 42 years old. I was in South Florida for Hurricane Andrew. I heed the warnings, and I do watch the weather reports. I've been tracking it very closely. But I have a newer home. It's made of all concrete. It could be a false sense of security, but I'm not leaving. I have some food. I have battery packs, and I'm just kind of hanging tight.
I mean, this is despite the authorities saying that this is a life and death situation, that it is unsurvivable, that it is catastrophic and the hurricane of the century. Sure.
Again, I've been tracking it. And it looks like we may have dodged a bullet, at least for the residents of Tampa. It looks like it's gone a little bit south. I think everyone, if they're in like a manufactured home or a trailer, they should reevaluate. But I'm in a newer home with good windows. I got a brand new roof and siding. I'm just kind of hopeful that everything works out.
I mean, again, given the authorities have said it's life and death, they've also said that, you know, that no one will come to rescue you.
Sure, I fully understand that. I'm taking my life into my own hands, essentially. But it's a calculated risk, and I feel everything's just going to be fine. You know, I've done as much prep as I can. I have, you know, everything in this house that I love and cherish is all here. I'm certainly not trying to die in it. I have a flotation device. I have my little kayak. It should be fine. You know, it's just kind of camping if the power goes out.
And what about your neighbours? What are they doing? Have they all left now? Because the window to evacuate, you know, is more or less closing very quickly.
Sure, they've all left, but you know, for their decisions, they all have small children and significant others and such. I don't have any of that. My parents are both pretty elderly, so I'm just here trying to make the best of it and, you know, maintain the little homestead that I do have.
And are you choosing to stay mainly because you don't want to leave your home, or it feels like a hassle to join the 5 million or so others who have been forced out?
It was definitely pandemonium watching firsthand the evacuation, and even a lot of my other friends that did evacuate, it was just total gridlock on the highways to get out of here. There's been difficulties finding gas. There's still a ton of road debris we got knocked out with a previous storm just 11 days ago. So there's still a lot of construction debris on the roads. That one flooded out my entire lower level of my home. I've just been in the middle of recovering now. I've got all the drywall ripped out, and now this newest storm comes out of nowhere. But again, it's just kind of a calculated risk. I've been watching the tracking of the storm and the wobble and all that. And I've lived in this home for 8 years. I've gone through half a dozen or so hurricanes. We do get water, so I'm ready for that. But I just think that the home, you know, it's a concrete block home. And I have maybe these false delusions of grandeur, but I feel safe in it.
So what are you going to do for the next few hours? Stay put, lock all your doors and windows, and I guess hope for the best?
Yeah, I've got all the hatches buttoned down. I've got the boat tied up the best I could. I'm just kind of hoping for the best. I've got my tuna fish, my water, my unripe bananas, and yeah, I'm just making the best of it.
Well, you know, Matthew, we wish you well. As we've said, the authorities have asked everyone to leave, at least 5.5 million people that they say are at risk and that they need to go now. But we're grateful that you've joined us, and stay safe.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's go straight to our James Matthews, who joins me live now. And James, just watching your report there, I saw you talk to someone who was also choosing not to leave. I mean, there are these people, despite what the authorities are saying about how dangerous this is, frankly, unsurvivable, they're not going anywhere.
That's right. Each to his own in these circumstances, I suppose, Yalda. The difficulty the authorities have here is hurricane fatigue. We are in a part of the world where hurricanes are a regular occurrence. They have heard the warnings in the past and they have sat tight and survived. So I think there is that element of complacency, as some would put it, and the challenge for officials from the president down is to send that clear message that it is a matter of life and death. One local sheriff was saying today that if you are in an evacuation zone and you choose to stay, write your name and next of kin on your arms so that we know to whom you should be delivered when we find you dead. So there is that that element of reinforcement going on. People, the message being rammed home about the danger of this storm, and already you feel it in the rain and the driving wind. I mean, we're still several hours from landfall of Hurricane Milton, but you feel it in the air under these darkened skies, that sense of its power approaching. And I have to say, to a large extent, people have heeded the warnings. They are off the streets. As you saw in my report, Tampa is a ghost town. That's one of the big worries. Tampa, a built-up area with a population of 400,000. That's never known a hurricane of this size for more than a century. So there is concern at the fact that Tampa might be in its path. But of course, wherever this hurricane hits, it is going to be a serious, serious problem. The figures bear that out. The wind speeds up to 180 miles an hour. Storm surges of up to 12 feet now. I mean, that's more than the height of a ceiling, and people are being given that start warning. You will drown, you will die. Look at what happened when Hurricane Helene hit less than 2 weeks ago, causing more than 230 deaths.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, the authorities have said your homes will be your coffins. I mean, absolutely extraordinary warnings, and seeing all those people leave, millions of people get out of the way. But James, as we know, in these moments of panic and you know, evacuation, there's also a lot of misinformation, and authorities try and get the right information to people.
Yeah, misinformation is threading through the political discussion that goes in parallel to this event, Yalda. And today, President Biden has come out stridently attacking Donald Trump for what he calls misinformation. He says this: there's been a reckless, irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies, and he names Trump as a perpetrator of that. Donald Trump has made unsubstantiated claims with regard to the management of hurricanes over the past few weeks, talking about disaster funds being channeled towards housing for immigrants, which isn't the case, saying that Biden refused to take a call from Georgia, senior officials in Georgia, again not the case. But Trump saying or alleging that there was political bias in terms of channeling funds towards North Carolina, where there isn't a strong Democratic vote. So these are claims made by Trump, being dismissed robustly by President Biden today. And of course, it is a big political issue. Look at George W. Bush, Hurricane Katrina in 2005. He is haunted by his failures in that particular episode. Biden will see the dangers to him and Kamala Harris if his performance throughout this series of hurricanes doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
James, I just want us to have a listen to what President Biden was saying a little earlier. Let's have a listen.
There's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies. Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That's simply not true. They're saying the money is needed for this crisis is being diverted to migrants. What a ridiculous thing to say. It's not true.
President Biden trying to clarify some of that misinformation, James, that you were just talking about. James, thanks so much for joining us, and stay safe. Well, joining me now is William Tokajer, who's the police chief of the Holmes Beach region in Florida. Thanks very much for joining us here on the program. I was just speaking to one man, and we know that millions of people have taken those warnings very seriously and have left the area. But I was just speaking to one man there who said, you know what, I think that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to stay at home. While the majority of people have left, what do you say to those people who are choosing to stay?
I say that it's not a good idea. It's reckless. We won't have any police presence, any firemen, any EMS, medical people out there. We have left the island. We have secured the island, and we have told everybody that it is not the right storm to ride out. If we have double the water that we had during Helena, Helena gave us water that was 22 inches into the garage. If we have double that, and that was a 6-foot rise, then that water would be over my head in the police department. That is not something you want to stay at home to.
How worried are you about what Florida is going to actually endure once this hurricane makes landfall?
We are very worried what it is. It's coming to us. We think that we're going to get a lot of the wind, a lot of the rain. And if we get the surge that has been predicted of 10 to 12 feet, then that could be catastrophic for our island. The Hurricane Helena was devastating to our island. We had 95% to 100% of our single-story homes had between 3 and 4 feet of water that devastated them. All of their belongings are still out on our streets, our side streets right now, in debris piles waiting to be picked up. And we did not have the time to pick those up. We could only go and pick up the debris that was on the main roads. So we have a lot of debris that's already out there. This is like a gut punch coming to us after being hit by Helena.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it is being just described as the hurricane of the century. It's going to be epic and catastrophic. It is also going to be epic trying to get all of these people into some kind of shelter until the authorities can figure out what to do next.
Yes, our island, when I left it this morning, it looked like a ghost town. There was nobody moving around. I didn't see anybody. I had one person yesterday that told me that they were going to stay, and they contacted me at 9:35 and said that they left the island. So I was glad to hear that, because we, as law enforcement, we had not left the island at that time, but we were happy to see that the one person that said he was planning to stay didn't. This could be devastating. I told people that in other press areas that if you're going to stay, then please write your name and the name of your next of kin and phone number on one of your body parts in a Sharpie. So if we come out and we are as devastated as what the weather channels have predicted, we at least have somebody that we can call when we return.
And, is there still a window for people to be able to leave, those people who might be listening tonight and are choosing to stay?
If they're going to leave, they need to get out now, because this is coming within the coming hours. We're already getting some serious bands coming through and a lot of wind and rain. So our roadways out on the island flood very quickly. So if they're going to get out, I hope that they have a high-profile vehicle, not a Prius.
William Tokajer, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Milton is predicted to bring with it a record storm surge of between 3 and 5 meters. What damage and destruction could that cause? And why did Milton get so much stronger so quickly? Here's our science and technology editor, Tom Clark.
Any storm bearing down on tens of millions of people is potentially catastrophic, but there are things about Hurricane Milton that have shocked experts. The first, how rapidly it grew or intensified. In just 16 hours, Milton went from a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane. Then things accelerated It went from Category 1 to the highest Category 5 in less than 24 hours, making it the third fastest intensifying hurricane on record. And it's what's driving this intensification that concerns experts. The temperature of the ocean. This is the average sea surface temperature in the Gulf of Mexico. This year, temperatures have trended a degree or more above that.
Scientist who studies climate change, who knows that the kinds of things we're seeing with Milton or with Helene, with how quickly they intensify, with the potential to produce really intense storm surges that are made worse by sea levels that are getting higher as we warm the planet. I think, it really is concerning from a climate change perspective as well.
And you heard it there, the danger of hurricanes is not just about wind speeds, it's how they pile water onto land as a storm surge. Milton will continue weakening as it approaches land, but it's headed for the centre of Florida's west coast, with Tampa here, its most populated part, making the risk of a deadly storm surge very real. This area in purple is a 150-mile-long stretch of coast where a surge is forecast to be up to 4.5 metres. Now, for context, I'm less than 2 metres tall. That's water beyond the height and the bounds of our virtual studio right up there, more than enough to swamp a single-storey home. So the repeated warnings to residents are not precautionary. The scale of casualties from Hurricane Milton depend very much on how many people choose to get well out of the way.
That was Tom Clark with that report. And stay with us because later in the programme we will be hearing from this man. Have a listen.
It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize.
A meteorologist so stunned by the power of Hurricane Milton, he choked up live on TV. Plus, the White House warns that Lebanon cannot and will not become another Gaza. We'll be live in Beirut.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over. Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered as something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground. How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again? I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation Analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to the programme and to Jerusalem. And I've been here all week assessing the situation in the Middle East. And Israel is ramping up the rhetoric around its plans to retaliate against Iran. The defence minister has warned the response will be lethal, precise and, above all, surprising. Yoav Gallant's comments come despite growing calls for restraint. And today, the first phone call between Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden for several weeks. The White House described it as a direct and productive call. But the big question, will it actually change anything? Today, there's been more bloodshed in the region. Let's just have a look. As Israel continues its fight on a war on a number of fronts, at least 45 people have been killed by strikes on Gaza in the last day as Israeli forces continued action in Jabalia. Local medics say 3 hospitals in northern Gaza have become almost inaccessible because of the fighting. The Israeli military issued an evacuation order for the northern part of the Strip over the weekend, but UNRWA says 400,000 people are still trapped in the area. Meanwhile, Israel continues its campaign of airstrikes across Lebanon, killing 4 people in a hotel that was sheltering displaced people. It's warned people to evacuate dozens of cities and towns across southern Lebanon, many of them north of a buffer zone declared by the United Nations after the last war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. Hezbollah militants have been hitting back as well. 2 people in Kiryat Shmona were killed in a strike earlier today, while the northern city of Haifa has been hit by rocket attacks. The IDF claimed 180 rockets had been launched across the border. Let's go live now to a report by our Dominique Waghorn.
Israel is now warning Lebanon it could become another Gaza. And from these drone pictures of one Lebanese village, that is already happening in places that Israel's invaded. Israel's cross-border incursions haven't stopped Hezbollah's attacks, though, launching scores of rockets at the north of Israel every day, most intercepted by air defences, but some getting through. One came crashing through this roof, the explosion blasting in windows and peppering apartments above with shrapnel. Terrifying for brother and sister Valeria and Vladi, who reached their shelter just in time.
We heard an insane bang that it felt like you knew it hit our building, so we're very
Everything
near.
was shaking.
It was very shaking. The whole building was shaking crazy.
The sound of glass shattering.
And we felt the whole building collapse and just the safe room stayed in place. That's how it felt.
Across the north of Israel today, missile attacks killed 2 Israeli civilians and injured several others.
While Hezbollah is still able to fire its missiles this far south into Israel, the prospect of Israeli civilians returning to their homes further north of here seems remote, and Hezbollah has hidden thousands of missiles right across Lebanon, many of them a long way away from the areas that Israel is currently invading.
The region is braced, though, for Israel's retaliation to this, Iran's assault on Israel with 200 ballistic missiles last week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discussed his plans with US President Joe Biden by phone today before his defense minister issued this warning to Tehran.
דיוק בנקודות השונות הוא מאוד מאוד
The accuracy at the various points of our attacks is very, very focused. The ability to attack is very strong. And as we have done so far in the war, in all other fronts, those who attack us will be hurt and will pay a price. Our attack will be lethal, precise, and above all, surprising. They will not understand what happened and how it happened. They will see the results.
The war that began in Gaza could still engulf the region in something even bigger. The conflict there has reached another awful milestone, its death toll reaching 42,000. Among the most recent to be killed, one of the youngest. 11-month-old Hossam al-Haldi, killed in an Israeli airstrike. At least 9 died, including 2 children in the area of Jabalia, where Israelis launched their 3rd ground offensive in a year. While Israel plots its next moves on other fronts, its war in Gaza seems stuck on repeat. Its people caught in a relentless cycle of anguish. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, in Haifa, northern Israel.
Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to our Alex Rossi, who joins me from Beirut. But we've got a bit of an update. The White House has now released details of that phone call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I'm just going to go through some of the details. Joe Biden has affirmed his ironclad commitment to Israel's security, which he also did when Iran launched those missiles on Iraq. In that phone call, he condemned Iran's ballistic missile attack against Israel, which took place last week. On Lebanon, the president emphasized the need for a diplomatic arrangement to safely return both Lebanese and Israeli civilians to their homes on both sides of the blue line. The readout goes on and says the president affirmed Israel's right to protect its citizens from Hezbollah, which has fired thousands of missiles and rockets into Israel over the past year alone, while emphasizing the need to minimize harm to civilians, in particular in the densely populated areas of Beirut. And we know that in the course of the last 2 weeks, southern Beirut has been completely battered by airstrikes almost daily, at sometimes several times a day. We've seen those airstrikes take place in a very densely populated area. And on Gaza, the leaders discussed the urgent need to renew diplomacy to release the hostages held by Hamas. The president also discussed the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the imperative to restore access to the north. And as we've said, UNRWA has said that 400,000 people still remain trapped. So just part of that readout from that conversation between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's bring in our Alex Rossi, who joins me now from Beirut. And Alex, we're getting some details now from this readout in this phone call. Nothing really surprising, very much in line with what we were hearing when that airstrike took place, those ballistic missiles, that Iran launched on Israel. And of course, a conversation around what should happen with Lebanon and in Gaza. But of course, we are seeing those continued strikes on both Hezbollah and Hamas, which is frankly impacting a lot of civilians as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big concern for the White House and President Joe Biden is the same concern, Yalda, that he has had for many months now, and that is to stop this from spiralling into a wider regional war. And quite frankly, the leverage that the Americans have managed to put on all sides in all of this hasn't really stopped that from looking as though it's going to happen. Now, this conversation between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the Vice President, was also present as well on the call, was described as direct by the White House, but also constructive. Now, you can pass the words and sort of interpret what direct means, but certainly the relationship between President Biden and Netanyahu has been pretty fractious. The two men have not spoken since late August, so that gives you an idea of how bad things have got. Now, within this conversation, I think it's also quite clear that the two men would have spoken about the promised Israeli response to the Iranian ballistic missiles. And what the Americans will be trying to do is shape that response so that it doesn't go too far up the ladder of escalation. The Iranians are threatening to retaliate if the Israelis retaliate, and you can see that this goes on until the two sides are locked in an endless and very destructive ballistic missile war. That's what they're hoping to avoid. So all eyes really, and everybody here is waiting to see what that Israeli response will be. The Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said that it will be surprising. He's also described it as going to be pretty hard. I think the big question is, how will the Iranians take it, and will they strike back? And again, we see this cycle of escalation, this very grim trajectory, this way that things have gone in this region for so long now. The White House, of course, trying to pull that back. Yeah, indeed, very much. Alex, thank you so much.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live in Jerusalem. Next up on the programme, how big a role could Arizona play in the upcoming US election? We're in the swing state as early voting gets underway.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. Let's return to our top story now, and warnings of a threat to life in Florida as Hurricane Milton barrels towards the US state. Well, a tornado warning has also been issued across most of southern Florida as reports say at least 2 twisters have been spotted. The hurricane is expected to be so powerful that one weatherman had this response live on air. Just have a look.
Incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
And John Morales joins us now. John, I have to say, just watching that clip, which has now been watched so many times and has gone viral, it was so incredibly moving to see how you responded to something you understood so well and the kind of impact it would have on so many lives and livelihoods.
It's funny, to a degree, a little funny, because it's a very geeky, nerdy moment. I'm talking about millibars, and here I am breaking down on air because I'm talking about millibars, but it meant something to me, right? 50 millibars of barometric pressure drop into the center of a hurricane over the course of 10 hours means explosive intensification of the hurricane. And not only at that very moment, just before they punched me up to go on air, not only was it dropping the pressure that precipitously, but the hurricane was classified as a Category 5 right at that moment. So, it had been a mundane tropical storm the morning before, and it was noon on Monday, and suddenly it was a Category 5. It was just very impactful. And there's other things I can get into in terms of why I got the way I got, but I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, I mean, no, we'd really like to know, because you were in that moment speaking about millibars, but also on a human level, we could almost understand why you reacted that way, because, as you say, in that really nerdy way, you really understood, perhaps more than the rest of us, what was going on and what was about to hit.
Right. So, with the pressure drop, I knew it wouldn't stop at 160 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. I knew it was going to go for a higher value, and it ended up with 180. And thankfully, it's off of its peak right now. Listen, I've written about this in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. You all can find those articles online, but they're very introspective, because I have realized that I have changed. I have always been known as the just the facts, non-alarmist weather presenter, meteorologist here in a television market, frankly, which Miami and Fort Lauderdale in South Florida is all about hyping up tropical threats. And I was always, swimming against that current and making sure people stayed calm. But here's the problem. Extreme weather events are multiplying. They're not only becoming more frequent, they're becoming more severe. We already know that there's a greater proportion of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes occurring around the world. In other words, there may not be a greater count of hurricanes and typhoons, but there's a greater percentage of them reaching these severe catastrophic levels, like Milton, like Helene, like Irma, like Dorian, like Harvey, like Maria. I mean, I can just go on, and all those names are just since 2017. So that angst, I think, drove me to that point, combined with frustration about being a climate communicator for decades, asking for action on climate, and then realizing that not enough has been done, and that therefore here we are, and look at these hurricanes go. And the last thing is just empathy. Just feeling for the future victims of the hurricane. I think there's some kind of psychological term for that, but I can't remember. Anticipatory grieving, maybe. It was just feeling for what's coming and people's lives being wrecked.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was incredibly powerful, moving, and people really did react to the way that you reacted in that very human moment. John, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to now switch your focus to another event in the United States, the upcoming presidential election. Polling suggests a growing lead for Kamala Harris in the race for the White House. But it's what's happening in the swing states that will decide who gets the keys. Today, early voting started in one of those battlegrounds, the state of Arizona. Tom Cheshire, our data and forensics correspondent, has been diving into the data. Have a look.
Less than a month ago, looks like we've had all the debates we're going to have. So what are the polls looking like? Well, this is the Sky News poll tracker, and we're interested in the gap here. That is a 2.7-point lead for Harris, and it looks fairly sustained, fairly entrenched. She's also edging up towards 50% of the vote. So that is useful, but it's not enough to win this, obviously, because it's all about this, the race to 270 electoral votes. Now, we've talked about swing states before. Here they are in grey all over the country. But we're going to go one better than swing states and talk instead about swing counties. Now, there are 3,000 counties in the USA, more than 3,000, but we've picked out 7 our data team. We're going to talk about 2 of them today and where they might decide the race, or at least give us an indication of where it's going. So let's go down to Arizona, that swing state, and we're going to go to Maricopa County. the city of Phoenix in the middle of that. And what's interesting about this is there are so many votes here. 62% of all the votes available in Arizona are coming out of Maricopa County. So it's important in and of itself. It's also been important in presidential races. You can see that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. And then 4 years later, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, and he took that county. Really, really important. And it's interesting in terms of what that county actually looks like in terms of the people who live in it. This is the demographic makeup of the county. You're comparing it to the state and also the US, so right down the middle here. That's like average for the US. Anything further to the right is a high proportion. So if you look at this, Hispanic, Latino population, really high proportion there, and also weekly wages. It's one of the highest earning places in the US. What that means, it's a confluence of factors. Hard to say, for instance, the Hispanic Latino population, traditionally Democrat, but Donald Trump has proved that he can pick up the votes. He has done that over the years. So it's hard to say exactly how that translates, but there's so many votes here. Compare that to another swing county. It's really, really an opposite story. Pennsylvania, we've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. Let's go to Erie County over here. Now, there are not many votes here. In fact, there's only 2% of the entire votes available in Pennsylvania. But what it does seem to have is a big predictive power, not predictive, but whichever way Erie County goes is where Pennsylvania tends to go to. So Trump beat Clinton in 2016, and then again Biden won it back from Trump. Difference here of just 1,417 votes. That shows how small this county is and how small the margins in that county is. But if you're watching on election night, and if Erie County goes one way, that could be a crucial indication. But it does show the size of the task, really. This race to 270. You've got two very different places. Maricopa down here, Erie up in the north, and both candidates have to hit both because what they want is to get those electoral college votes. 11 in Arizona, but 19 in Pennsylvania. So again, that is why Erie County, Pennsylvania is going to be crucial to this whole race. So if you're watching and Erie County goes one way, that could be a really good sign of which way the whole presidency is going to go.
Our Tom Cheshire there. Well, let's go straight to Martha Kellner, who joins me live from Phoenix, Arizona. Martha, I mean, as we've been saying, these swing states is where it's going to matter. What are the people you're talking to saying now?
Yeah, this is a key day, Yalda, for the state of Arizona and for both the Harris and Trump campaigns, who are focusing so much of their campaigning energy on the state of Arizona. Only recently a swing state. It was a surprise victory for the Democratic Party and President Biden in 2020. And as Tom was saying there, whoever wins Arizona will have to go through Maricopa County, which is where I am. It's home to the state's capital, the major metropolitan centre, Phoenix, home to more than 60% of the population. So the people who are voting here today and over the next 27 days until Election Day could well hold the key to the White House. It feels like a side issue at the moment, but it is incredibly hot here. It's nudging 40 degrees, perhaps affecting the numbers of people going in and out of the polling station behind me. I have spoken to a few of them who have cast their votes today, motivated by similar issues as the rest of the electorate, really. The economy, specifically gas prices, motivated by immigration on the southern border, by the state of democracy, and by abortion too. And that is a specific issue for Arizona because abortion is a separate ballot measure here. Voters here have the option to vote to protect the right to choose in the state's constitution. But interestingly, I was speaking to one woman, Kate, who's a nurse, who said she's still voting for Donald Trump, despite the fact that she is a proponent for a woman's right to choose, for reproductive rights. She says she's voting for Trump because she simply believes that he will shore up the southern border, that he will curb the numbers of illegal migrants coming over into the country.
Martha, as we know, it's going to be incredibly tight. Thank you so much for all of your reporting. Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live here from Jerusalem. We've got lots coming up after the break. Violence and tragedy in Beirut. My colleague Mark Austin reports on what led Lebanon to this new point of crisis.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police
police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they make almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Jerusalem, and I want to focus now on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. It's become synonymous with war. Today, my colleague Mark Austin met Ronnie Chatter, whose father was assassinated in political violence 10 years ago. Ronnie is now on a mission to tell the story of the tragedy of Beirut. Have a look.
It is a skyline Beirut has got used to, not just now, but for decades. A people plagued by endless war and political violence. A city of tragedy for people like Ronnie Chatter, who shows me pictures of his father, a politician and diplomat, assassinated in a car bombing here.
The pain is permanent, but I've been more or less committed ever since that moment to make sure his memory lives on.
Ronnie's life work is now to tell the story of Beirut in all its pain and with all its battle scars.
There are visible wounds in every single neighborhood.
He takes us to a building that's become a monument to the 15-year civil war.
This building was a sniper's den, monitoring the front line between East and West Beirut. And this literally was a front line for the city that you wouldn't cross without risking your life.
Then to the carcass of a shell and bullet-ridden hotel, unchanged since the 80s.
On one street corner in Beirut, you can see layers and layers of war. And this is 34 years after the civil war ended.
Now Beirut deals with the ruins of yet another war.
Right now you're seeing what could be the last stand. The slow free fall of a country that was once better known for maybe being the crown jewel of the Middle East. And today, unfortunately, still until this point at least, hosts the crown jewel of the Iranian regime.
What do you make of Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Hezbollah's now so weakened, it's the opportunity for the people of Beirut to stand up and take back their country?
I think when he speaks more about Lebanon, it's usually to do with Israel setting security terms that may actually be good for the Israelis, but can spell devastation for Lebanon.
Our final stop is the plaza where there's a plaque that marks the spot where his father was killed.
Things are being dictated through bombs, not through diplomacy. I think that's the reason I reflect on my father's work regularly, looking for a better way forward.
A place that symbolizes the grief of Ronnie Chatter and also the pervading sense of trauma in this city.
That was my colleague Mark Austin. Now, before we go off air tonight, I just wanted to remind you about the launch of our new podcast, The World with Richard Engel and myself. And the first episode is available now. Richard and me discuss how events in this region could impact the US election. You can scan the QR code on screen now to start downloading it. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And that's all for tonight's program. It feels like a waiting game as Israel decides how it will respond to Iran's missile attack. And even as they strategize, intense fighting is continuing in northern Gaza. Parts of southern Lebanon have been decimated, and the IDF has expanded its ground invasion there. And of course, there was a lot riding on that phone call between Joe Biden and whether he was going to convince Benjamin Netanyahu to temper his response. We'll be following all the developments. Good night for now.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?